The American Revolutionary War ended not with a final battle, but with the Treaty of Paris in 1783, a document that officially recognized the United States as a free and independent nation. This treaty didn't just grant independence, it defined the nation's borders from the Atlantic to the Mississippi and from the Great Lakes to Spanish Florida. American negotiators like Franklin, Adams, and Jay secured a vast territory, promising a future of westward expansion. The treaty also granted Americans fishing rights off Newfoundland and addressed the treatment of loyalists, though its recommendations for restoring their property were weak and largely ignored. British forces were ordered to withdraw from American soil, including key forts in the Northwest Territory, a promise that would soon be tested. The Treaty of Paris set the stage for a new experiment in self-government, but the reality of building a nation would prove far more complicated. The grand promises of Paris would soon collide with the challenges of debt, division, and the struggle to fulfill the ideals of liberty. The ink was barely dry before the new nation faced its first tests. The journey from revolution to stable republic was just beginning. Independence brought immediate crisis. The United States was drowning in debt, about $79 million, with no reliable income. The government owed money to foreign allies and its own citizens, but had no power to tax. Soldiers who fought for freedom returned home unpaid, sparking unrest like the Newburgh Conspiracy, where only Washington's intervention prevented a military coup. Loyalists faced persecution and property loss despite treaty promises, and many fled, deepening social rifts. Meanwhile, the British refused to leave their forts, citing America's failure to honor debts to loyalists. The weak central government, under the Articles of Confederation, could not enforce laws, collect taxes, or resolve disputes between states. States ignored Congress's requests for money, leaving the government powerless. The chaos and instability made it clear winning independence was only the first step. Building a functioning nation would require far more than a signed treaty. The young republic was on shaky ground. The Articles of Confederation created a deliberately weak national government, reflecting deep fears of tyranny. Each state had one vote in Congress, regardless of size, and major laws required approval from 9 states. Amendments needed all 13. Congress couldn't tax or regulate commerce. It could only request money from states, which often refused. With no executive or judiciary, there was no way to enforce laws or resolve disputes. States acted like independent countries, printing their own money, setting trade barriers, and pursuing separate foreign policies. Economic warfare and confusion reigned, as Congress lacked authority over interstate or foreign trade. Foreign powers exploited this disunity, flooding American markets with cheap goods while blocking American exports. The government's inability to pay debts, fund an army, or negotiate effectively left the nation vulnerable. The Confederation was crumbling, unable to manage the economy or command respect. The need for a stronger, unified government was becoming undeniable. The experiment in loose confederation was failing. Post-war America was mired in economic chaos. The continental currency was worthless, and states printed their own unstable money. Commerce stalled as merchants refused out-of-state currency, and farmers, artisans, and merchants struggled to survive. The loss of British markets devastated American trade, especially in New England, and Congress was powerless to negotiate new treaties. On the frontier, land disputes and competing claims led to violence and confusion, despite attempts like the Land Ordinance of 1785. Social tensions rose as debt-burdened farmers resented the wealthy elite, fueling demands for debt relief and greater political power. The old social order was breaking down, replaced by calls for equality and liberty amid hardship. Economic instability threatened the very fabric of society. Americans were forced to confront what their revolution truly meant. The promise of independence was overshadowed by daily struggle. By the late 1780s, economic hardship pushed rural communities, especially in Massachusetts, to the brink. Unpaid war veterans faced crushing debts and high taxes. Many lost their farms and were sent to debtors' prison. Feeling betrayed by the new government, thousands of farmers led by Daniel Shays rose in armed revolt, shutting down courts to stop foreclosures. The state responded with force, raising a private army to crush the rebellion at Springfield. The uprising was quickly suppressed, but its impact was profound. Shays Rebellion exposed the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation and the inability of the national government to maintain order. Leaders like Washington and Hamilton saw the rebellion as a warning. The Republic was at risk of collapse. The crisis convinced many that reform was not enough. A stronger national government was essential. The road to the Constitutional Convention was now clear. Shays Rebellion became a rallying cry for change. The nation stood at a crossroads. Would it descend into chaos or find a new path forward? The answer would be decided in Philadelphia. In 1787, delegates from 12 states gathered in Philadelphia, determined to fix the broken system. Their original goal was to revise the Articles, but leaders like Madison and Hamilton pushed for a new constitution. The central debate, how to balance power between large and small states. The Great Compromise created a bicameral legislature, representation by population in the House, equal representation in the Senate. The issue of slavery nearly derailed the convention, but the 3/5 compromise and a 20-year extension of the slave trade secured Southern support. These compromises were fraught but necessary to unite the states. The new Constitution established a stronger federal government with separate executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The delegates emerged with a framework that could adapt and endure. The American experiment would continue, now with a government built to last. The Constitution was sent to the states for ratification, setting the stage for a new era. With the Constitution ratified, George Washington became the first president, tasked with turning theory into practice. The Judiciary Act of 1789 established the federal court system, ensuring uniform application of the law. The nation's finances were in crisis, so Washington appointed Alexander Hamilton as Treasury Secretary. Hamilton's bold plan, the federal government would assume state war debts, consolidating national credit. He also proposed a national bank to stabilize currency and manage government funds, sparking fierce constitutional debate. Jefferson and Madison opposed the bank, arguing it exceeded constitutional authority, but Hamilton prevailed with the doctrine of implied powers. A political bargain placed the national capital in the South in exchange for support of Hamilton's financial plan. The result, a stable financial system and the founding of Washington, D.C. These early decisions shaped the nation's future and proved the new government could act decisively. Washington and Hamilton's leadership set vital precedents for the Republic. Hamilton's excise tax on whiskey sparked fierce resistance among Western farmers, leading to the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794. Washington responded by leading a massive militia force to Pennsylvania, demonstrating the federal government's resolve to enforce its laws. The rebellion collapsed without major bloodshed, proving the new government's strength. Meanwhile, political divisions deepened. Hamilton's supporters formed the Federalist Party, favoring strong central government and industry. Jefferson and Madison led the Democratic Republicans, championing states' rights and agrarian values. Partisan conflict intensified, culminating in the Alien and Sedition Acts, which targeted immigrants and restricted free speech. These laws sparked outrage and a constitutional crisis, further entrenching party divisions. The young nation was learning the costs and the necessity of political opposition. Surrounded by powerful empires, the United States faced constant diplomatic and frontier challenges. War between France and Britain divided Americans, but Washington's proclamation of neutrality kept the nation out of conflict. British occupation of Western forts and the impressment of American sailors strained relations, leading to the controversial Jay Treaty, which narrowly preserved peace. Meanwhile, Pinckney's treaty with Spain secured navigation rights on the Mississippi and access to New Orleans, opening the West to American settlers. On the frontier, Native American resistance was fierce. After early defeats, General Anthony Wayne's victory at Fallen Timbers forced tribes to cede vast lands in Ohio and Indiana. The Treaty of Greenville opened the floodgates for westward expansion. Diplomacy and military force shaped the nation's borders and future. The United States was asserting itself, at home and abroad. The struggle to define the nation's place in the world had only just begun.